Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can any of you tell me the legal definition of gross negligence or willful misconduct as it would apply to this instance?
Congressman, gross negligence and willful misconduct not specifically defined in the statute. Gross negligence.
So, okay, to that point, Mr. Pirelli. So then it really is up to the judgment of a judge.
Ultimately,
some judge could say 40-something days of pushing oil out into the Gulf of Mexico, ruining thousands of people's lives, 11 deaths. Some judge could just make an arbitrary decision that this is not gross negligence or willful misconduct. Is that correct?
Certainly the interpretation of both those terms would be up to a judge. I will say that certainly both gross negligence and willful misconduct are interpreted in many different federal statutes. So I think there is an established case law, but they're not specifically defined in this statute.
Well, again, Mr. Chairman, with that point, I would certainly hope that the legislation being drafted would try to establish at least a legal threshold of what would constitute this. We don't need to, I'll leave it at that. Secondly, Mr. Chairman, I've asked in last week's hearing for a side-by-side comparison of the Coast Guard inspections versus foreign flag inspections that were allowed in the case of the Deepwater Horizon. It has just in the past few minutes been supplied to me by the Coast Guard. I would ask that that be submitted for the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
Mr. Pirelli, again, I've only had about 2 minutes to look at this, so please forgive me if I read it to you. But we'll start with structure, stability, and loading. If that vessel had been U.S. flagged, the United States Coast Guard would have had to conduct a comprehensive hull inspection, a dry dock inspection, an internal structural and cargo tank inspection for structural watertight integrity and inadequacy. Contrast that with a foreign flag vessel where they do a spot check for the condition of doors, cargo hatches, vents, railings, coamings, ladders. A spot check of trim and stability. But it gets better. On when it came to fire safety, had it been a U.S. flag vessel, the Coast Guard would have done a systems, equipment, reviewed and approved plan on just to build it. They would have inspected for proper installation. They would have tested operation of all systems and equipment for compliance. And they would witness third-party maintenance inspections and inspect the material condition of fire safety equipment. I would contrast that with what did occur, where the Coast Guard, in this instance, because it was a foreign flag vessel, reviewed certificates of third-party maintenance inspections. So basically, if the folks in the Marshall Islands, for a fee or for whatever reason, chose to just issue a certificate saying that these guys are living by the rules, that was good enough. Now, Mr. Pirelli, a lot of things are going to come out of these hearings. I would hope one of the things the United States Justice Department would be insisting on, for those vessels operating in United States territorial waters, they got to live by our rules. They can't get a pass from some third world country that says this is good enough. And we as a nation shouldn't be expecting the word of some third world country that this is good enough. Obviously, there are 11 dead mariners and thousands of people's lives who's been affected by this. And Mr. Chairman, again, U.S. territorial waters, we should not be relying on somebody else's self-check-off list that they're living by the rules. Going back to the question of who defines gross negligence, has there been any effort on the part of any of your agencies to come up with what you think is a fair definition of that in this instance?
Congressman, we have not focused on writing a definition, but we would certainly be happy to work with the committee if you were looking at drafting a new definition for that.
Mr. Abbey, I'm really...
We'll ask the, following your earlier question, discussed with counsel, a request to Justice Department for drafting assistance in formulating the principles that you enunciated.
Mr. Abbey, under the federal response plan, you know, again, we are both from Mississippi. Just this week, I inspected the contractors that BP hired as far as their land cleanup. I visited one of their vessel of opportunity operations. And again, they are trying. What I don't see is a comprehensive plan to try to keep the oil from hitting Mississippi's barrier islands and Mississippi's beaches. Is your agency, is the Coast Guard, is anybody within our nation the lead agency to look over what should be a comprehensive plan? And in the absence of a comprehensive plan, is anyone stepping forward to saying this is what it ought to look like?
Congressman Taylor, are you talking about after the spill or before
Yes, sir.
the spill?
I'm talking about right now. What I don't see, and again, I am asking this in the form of a question.
Yes.
Are you, is the Coast Guard, is the Department of Homeland Security, does anyone have the legal authority to turn to BP and say, this is what your response plan ought to look like? We gave you 40-something days to come up with one, and we're not satisfied with what you got.
Congressman, I can answer that in that the National Incident Commander, Admiral Allen, and the FOSC on scene are running the response, and so they do have the authority to direct BP and any response efforts, and that can be pretty broad, that they deem are required to respond to this.
Sir, that's my whole point. Is anyone giving them a specific list of things to do based on the mistakes that were made in Louisiana, and apparently the mistakes that are being made where water washed up on the Florida Panhandle? Is anyone giving them a list of saying, you need more skimmers out there, you need a greater presence, don't wait for it to hit the beach? And again, I'm asking this in the form of a question because I don't know the answer, and I'm not so certain there is an answer coming from our nation.
Well, let me address that. I spent 3 weeks down in Robert, Louisiana at the Joint Command Center. There are reports and requests that are received each day by that Joint Command indicating what supplies are needed in order to accomplish the goals that are being laid out to protect the resources along the Gulf Coast. Based upon those requests, there are decisions that are being made by the incident commanders to move forward and to provide the supplies and the actions that are necessary in order to meet those goals. So, as already alluded to by Mr. Bennett, there is an incident commander that's in charge who has full authority to move forward with any actions deemed necessary in order to address your concerns.
Okay. Lastly, Mr. Chair, and I know I'm over my time, Mr. Chairman, but for the record, are any of your agencies stepping forward to propose a new generation, since we all got caught flat-footed on this one? Are any of your agencies stepping forward to propose a new generation of blowout preventers, skimmers, containment booms, collection booms? Because it's just a sad fact that technology has not really progressed one iota in the past 20 years. And we sat back and hoped that the private sector would do it. They didn't. Are any of your agencies making recommendations of what those things ought to look like now?
Congressman, I can speak for the Coast Guard and probably everybody that this event is of such magnitude that the answer is yes, everything is on the table, everything is being looked at, and no stone is going to be left unturned as to where we go to make it right for the future, and that all risks are taken into account.